Wednesday, November 6th, 2019, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So running a YouTube channel is more than just doing your own research of the things you're interested in. It's also communicating with your viewers and subscribers, listening to them as well, what they're interested in. A lot of times what they're interested in is what you are interested in yourself. And recently one of the viewers referred a YouTube channel to me called the Justinian Deception. And if you really want to dig deep into the rabbit hole of what's going on in the world, you need to watch this channel. The guy who runs the channel is an Australian by the name of Rowan Stanley. To summarize, he goes over the difference between common law, law of the land, and commercial or maritime law. And he notes that we've all been deceived grammatically through the decades, and that a lot of the things that we accept because we consent to it. So he basically covers the legal side of things, the grammatical side of things. He talks about the English language. He talks about dog Latin, which is a perverted Latin language. And he talks about ancient Latin, which is the proper Latin that the Vatican uses, and how our documents have been corrupted and basically pushed us into accepting a corrupt system that is not based on the law of the land, but it's based on commercial maritime law. And so I've been listening to his videos. I started looking at his channel on Sunday when my viewer reminded me that he or she had, I think it's he had told me about this channel maybe about 10 days ago. I hadn't followed up on it, and I started looking at the Justinian Deception on Sunday. I've watched a few of his videos, and actually I had seen Rowan speak before, not in his channel, probably a few years before he started his channel. His channel is only 2 years old. He talks about all kinds of subjects, but one thing that he talks about is the money. And of course, being an Australian, he focuses a lot on Australia. And he notes that in 1966, Australian schools stopped teaching Latin, right? And it also happened to be the same year that Australia went from the pound as a currency to the dollar as a currency. So it's very interesting. And the other thing I was looking at, because the old Australian coins, the silver coins, for example, one of them was called a Florin. And it says here, I'm looking on Wikipedia, the Australian Florin was a coin used in the Commonwealth of Australia before decimalisation in 1966. The denomination was first minted in 1910 to the same size and weight of the United Kingdom florin. So it goes on to say florins minted from 1910 to 1945 were produced with 925 sterling silver content, weighing 11.31 grams, with actual silver weight of 10.46 grams. So, and then it goes on to say that from 1946 to 1963, the content was cut down to half, or 500. So the silver content was 50%, and the actual silver weight was 5.65%. So, and it's interesting that they also stopped teaching Latin, right? And why is grammar so important? Well, Rowan is talking about, for example, the fact that if you capitalize every letter, let's say the United States of America, that actually doesn't mean anything in English grammar. It would mean something if you wrote the United States of America, but only the T, the U, the N, and the A in capitals, right? That would be English, right? So basically saying everything that when it's block capitals doesn't mean anything, it's just a sign. If you really want to know why, go to his YouTube channel, because I'm trying to just show you here how it affects central banking and the promissory notes that they issue. The other thing he talks about in the ancient Latin, when they had everything in block capitals, there was a hyphen or a little dot between the words, and that makes sense. That's correct. But when you put it all in what he calls dog Latin, it doesn't mean anything. So I wanted to test his theory about how the central banks, governments have deceived us into accepting, for example, the Bank of England note, which is not really a promissory note. So how do they get away with issuing these if they're not really anything? I also look at the florin, right? Because prior to, let's see, 1946, florins had the proper amount of silver, sterling silver, right? So you can see this 1927 florin here. It says Parliament House, Australia, 1 florin. Look what's between each of those words, even though they're all in block capitals. Wow, it's a dot or hyphen, right? Quite interesting, right? And then you go to the 1954 florin, right? Which doesn't have the proper amount of silver for it to be called the florin. And they don't even say 1 florin anymore. They just say Australia florin, all in capitals, and no dot or hyphen. So I did a little test because I also have a £5 note from 1951, and I wanted to compare it to the more recent £20 note that we have these days, right? So as you can see here on the screen, I looked into the £5 Bank of England note from 1951. And as you can see on the top, it says Bank of England. You notice how the B is capital and the E is capital in Bank of England. The rest is in small letters, right? Or lowercase. And the interesting part, the other thing he talks about, that a document, the margins of the document, if you write in the margins of the document, whatever you write in the margins of the document are not really part of the document, right? That's the other thing. So this is the promissory note here from 1951. So it says I, so that's capital, that's fine. And then promise, the P is capital, but the rest of the word is lowercase. And then to pay, the bearer, the B is in capital. On demand, the D is in capital. And you can see that the whole thing is in lowercase, except for in the beginning of some words, like August 31st, London. And then the important part as well, right? So the Bank of England, and this is actually signed by the chief cashier here. So he's the one who's promising, I promise, right? But you notice as well, underneath his signature here, it says chief cashier, and the C is in capital for both words, but the rest of the words are the rest of the letters are lowercase. So this is a proper legal document. I'm not sure if people looked into this in 1951 at the legality of this, because Britain or England was not under the gold standard back then. They were, I guess, under the gold standard indirectly through Bretton Woods. And I would say a £5 note would be a note that very few people would have back then. It was worth quite a lot in purchasing power. So let's now go and look at the present £20 note, right? One thing I noticed that I hadn't thought about was the margin, right, of the document that Rowan talks about. And you can see that Bank of England is written pretty much how it was on the 1951 note. But notice that there's like to the left-hand side of the note is like a margin, right? It's like white. It's different from the rest of the note, which is kind of blue. And then underneath the Bank of England, you've got the chief cashier's promise, right? It's the same as the one in 1951. Well, it looks the same, but as Rowan talks about, this is a dog Latin because all the words are capitalized, all the letters are in block capitals. So this actually is dog Latin. This doesn't mean anything. This doesn't have any legal standing at all. And I would note as well, if you look at where it says London for the Governor and Company of the Bank of England, Chief Andrew Bailey, the signature, and then it says Chief Cashier. Notice how that is kind of on the margin, right? On the margin of the rest of the document. And notice how everything now is in block capitals, even the Chief Cashier. So what does that mean? Well, that means that this banknote is basically nothing really. And that's how they get away with making this promise, because it's not a real legal promise like this one here. So if they went back to making these notes like this, I know they're bigger, but they could make them within this size, they would be in trouble because it would be a legally binding contract. This is nothing. So this is really interesting what Rowan talks about, and this is how they get away with it, issuing things that are basically a piece of paper, not worth much. A lot of you know that already, right? So the same thing for the Federal Reserve note. And I don't have too many Federal Reserve notes because I'm in the UK, right? But I have an old, well, it's 1995. It's a $2 Federal Reserve note. But you can see it's the same thing. Federal Reserve note is all in capital and block letters. He calls them also gloss. That means it doesn't really mean anything. If that was a real legal document, you'd have to have hyphens between Federal Reserve and note, right? And then you look up underneath the picture of Jefferson, you've got the United States of America. There's not even a space between the words. It's all block capital. The $2 as well. Where it says Treasurer of the United States, right, and Secretary of the Treasury, that is in normal, proper English. It's not in capitals. But notice that where it says this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. So that as well as dog Latin. It's all capital and block capitals. There's no hyphen between the words. If they really wanted to make it legal, only the T from this would be capitalized, right? And the rest would be just like normal English, like you write a sentence. So this is how they get away with it. This is how they can claim that this is worth something, right? With the grammar. So how do you protect yourself if you're in the UK? If you're sick and tired of what's going on, what the establishment is doing. And one story that recently, I'm sure a lot of people have seen, is this cover-up by ABC for 3 years of the Epstein story, right? Which is quite sickening. And the ABC anchor, one of the conversations she had with one of her producers was caught on tape, and it was leaked by Veritas. And she talks about how the palace threatened ABC 3 years ago with publishing the story, the video with Virginia Roberts, right? The palace, she means, of course, Buckingham Palace. So how do you stop supporting these people? Well, there's one way. Of course, we still need to use these to function day to day, but if you have a lot of extra ones of these, or if you're able to save these, this is just a piece of paper. It's a promissory note that's not a promissory note. If you keep it in the bank, it's not really yours. It's an unsecured loan to the bank, right? One way to protect yourself, of course, is with gold and silver. Many of you probably haven't bought gold and silver. The easiest way to buy gold and silver is through bullion dealers. You Google bullion dealers in the UK, and there's several different bullion dealers, reputable dealers. One that I use and have been using since 2002 is Gold Investments. They're in the city of London. They're family run. They have a promo code, maneco64 for me. So if you call them and give them maneco64, you get a small discount from your purchases of gold and silver. What should you buy? Well, I know it's got the Queen's head on this, and but it's still gold, so you shouldn't really worry about the fact that she's on the coin. It's a gold sovereign. Which year do you buy? Well, it doesn't matter because they're all the same, be it from Queen Victoria, right, or the present Queen, a newer coin. They're all the same weight and size. Half sovereigns are half a sovereign, of course. What about silver? Well, of course, with silver, if you buy one of these, a Britannia, 1 ounce Britannia, there is VAT of 20%. Should you worry about the VAT? I've never worried about it. I started buying silver in 2003. The 20% that I paid then is insignificant now. Seeing how the price has gone up, I don't think you should worry about it. The other alternative, of course, is to buy the pre-1919 coins, which are still coin of the realm, even though they don't circulate. They're 925 silver, and there's no VAT on them, but they're harder to find. Make sure you don't buy numismatic coins, which basically means collector's coins. Just buy, try to find ones that are very abundant out there, that you basically paying for the price of silver, right? And the other thing you need to know when buying precious metals is the weight, right? 1 ounce of gold is basically, that's a troy ounce. It's not a normal ounce, and it's 31.103 grams. So that's all you need to know, the 31.1 and the 1 troy ounce. So a sovereign is just under 8 grams of gold, right? So that's not an ounce. It's just under a quarter of an ounce. So those are the things you need to know. 1 troy ounce, 31.103 grams. The sovereign is 0.2345 of an ounce. 1 ounce silver Britannia is 31.13 grams. And then for the old coins, for example, for the half crown, all you need to do is buy a little scale or something, and you weigh that, or look on Google, Wikipedia. They give you the weight of a half crown, and you multiply that by 0.925, and you get the silver content. And then you can work out if you're buying at a decent price, right, to the spot price of silver. And that's what you do. Well, that's what I do. It's up to you to decide whether you want to do that, of course. So there you go. That's how they get away with it. Through the grammar, through the legalese. It's quite amazing. Most people, even I, didn't even think about looking at these things. You know, block capital letters, lowercase. So thank you, Rowan, from Justinian Deception. Thank you to my viewer who gave me the idea to look into this channel. And yeah, it's a deep rabbit hole. I think it's good to know these things. Does it mean that we get out of the whole system? I think that's impossible. There are some people who try to get out of the system. A lot of it is got to do with the birth certificate, right, and your surname. But that's not what I'm telling people to do, because you can, as Rowan says many times, you can still live within the system, but it's good to know what the system is. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. You can also follow me on Twitter, Steemit, and on DTube. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.